Our film starts with a couple of guys going through a frat initiation that seems to be attempting to scare them by making them believe they're going to be hanged. The guys don't fall for the ruse and instead call it dumb and make a deal with the frat that instead of dealing with stupid hazing, they should be let in if they provide anything of their choosing to the party. The head of the frat requests strippers. After calling a few girls they know and getting turned down, they decide to pool their money together to hire a professional. They decide to get a rich nerd named Duncan involved because he has a car to get them to a strip club and play on his desperation for friends to make it happen. In exchange for the car, they have to be his friend for a week. On the drive, they see an ad for a place called the After Dark Club and decide that's their destination. Unfortunately, this place is in a really bad part of town and they end up stopping at a diner where Keith ends up making eyes at a girl, but spit takes when he sees the girl's really messed up grill. Her and the crew she's with then threaten him with a knife, but he's saved by his buddy AJ who fights them off. When they finally get to the club, AJ goes in by himself to try to negotiate a stripper, but an upset Duncan says he didn't come all that way to wait outside, so he goes in and Keith follows him. While they're there, a cute blonde waitress gets really excited and begins waving at Keith. She then walks up to him and tells him that she remembers him, but clearly he doesn't remember her, which blows Duncan's mind that he wouldn't remember her. Eventually, a dancer named Katrina comes on stage and does some type of interpretive dance routine where she's in bizarre white makeup and humps a headless mannequin that probably wouldn't go too far in a real strip club, but for the sake of the story, got a great applause from the club's patrons and impressed AJ enough to pick her as the one he wants for the party. He goes to a hostess who takes him to the back. While that's happening, the blonde waitress is still trying to get Keith to remember her, making a gesture hinting that a spin the bottle game was involved. AJ finally gets to the back in an Egyptian-themed room, and as he's looking at his reflection through a fish tank, Katrina appears behind him. He attempts to proposition her to appear at the frat party, but she says nothing. Eventually, she lays down, takes her robe off, and gets on top of him. This leads to a very hot scene, which unfortunately for Keith ends with her fanging out and taking a chunk out of his neck. Meanwhile, after a few weird run-ins with the bouncer and the announcer of the club, AJ freaks out and decides it's time to go. When he goes to the host that took Keith to the back, she claims to not know what he's talking about. He tells the waitress obsessed with him about it, and she takes him to the back where they claim he left. She uses this time to convince Keith to come on break with her and to wait for her in the back. That's when he notices his bouncer taking something to the dump and someone else going to pick it up, but before he can look, the waitress shows up. She continues to ramble about telling Keith who she is, while back at the club, the announcer yells at the host for bringing Katrina, a victim who was not a transient. Katrina then sits the host down and pulls her heart out of her chest. Eventually, Keith and the waitress head to the nasty hotel where the girls stay, looking for AJ, and Keith ends up getting off on the wrong floor. When he heads back into the elevator, it shuts on him and attempts to decapitate him, but he uses a fire extinguisher to hold it long enough to escape. The waitress is still no help, as she is more obsessed with him remembering her than helping him with the whole reason he's there. She eventually walks off in anger about him still not remembering, and Keith is then confronted by Snowball and his gang from earlier. He hides in the sewer to get away. While there, he notices a little girl he saw earlier and tries to get her attention, but then one of Snowball's gang members confronts her. As he does, the little girl attacks him before you see the guy fall dead in front of the sewer grate. The little girl is also a vampire. When he leaves the sewer, Snowball's crew tracks him down again, and he hides in a dumpster. As he's getting out, he finds the bodies of AJ and the hostess there. A garbage truck comes by, and he tries to stop it just for it to try to run him over. Keith, still not realizing everything and everyone is trying to kill him, goes to a payphone and calls the police. After the call, he heads back to the club and finally remembers Duncan exists and tells him that AJ's dead. He heads to the bathroom and gets nervous when someone tries to open the stall door. The person opens it and it's AJ, telling him that it was all just a joke. Just then, the police arrive and reprimand Keith for bringing him to that part of town for a false report. When he tries to leave, one of the strippers fangs out and tries to attack him, but he impales her with her high heel before she can bite him. That's when AJ lets him know everyone in the building is a vampire, including him. He then fangs out and tells him there is no way out because he has no control and wants to feed on him. Keith asks him for a favor, which is to make sure he doesn't become like him. AJ grows some sympathy and instead asks Keith to kill him. This goes on for a while before AJ forces the stake Keith is holding through his own chest and gives him the keys to the car. When Keith tries to take the waitress and Duncan out of the club, they're stopped at the door by the announcer and the vampire workers. Keith tries to explain his way out, and we get a moral lesson from the announcer, who explains he used to own the place, and the only people who come to a place like that are the worst of society, and no one tells anyone they come there, so no one will be looking for them. Keith gets an idea to ask for a last drink, but uses the liquor as an accelerant. He spills it all over the floor, then uses the rest as a Molotov cocktail before escaping through a maintenance elevator while the club is burning. As they get in the car to drive off, several vehicles chase after them with the intent of stopping them, including the tow truck and the garbage truck from earlier. As they're pinned back, about to be rammed between the two trucks, a car pulls out just in time for them to escape, leaving the trucks to run into each other. Just when they think they're home free, Duncan tells them that he's hungry. When they turn around, they see that he too is a vampire. Keith then panics and wrecks the car, and him and the waitress get out before it blows up with Duncan in it. The couple then breaks into a department store to get weapons, and Keith finally intelligently forces the waitress to tell him who she is and prove she isn't a vampire. Before she does, he instead ends up using an arrow on another vampire behind her, and she acts offended, though we don't see her reflection in the security mirror. They head to a bus thinking they're saved, but instead get surrounded by vampires. They only escape when Snowball and his gang show up, and the vampires then put their attention toward him. Well, almost escape, as just before they head to the sewers, she stops them just to again talk about their past. She explains her name is Allison Hicks, and he was her first kiss during a game of spin the bottle. Clearly, we could have ended the movie here, but apparently there were vampires or something, so we keep going. They head down into the sewer where they hear footsteps following them and hide, completely unaware that the place they were hiding was the vampire's crypt. As they go to sneak out, Allison scares herself with a flashlight, waking the vampires up. They knock down fuel barrels that were down there for reasons no one but the makers of every shooting video game knows, and use that to burn the crypt and the vampires in it. When Keith turns around, Allison is missing. When he finds her, Katrina has her and is threatening to bite her. As he has his bow and arrow cocked, he sees light coming from the ceiling. When Katrina gets distracted by the blood coming from his hand, he shoots her in the mouth, temporarily pinning her to the wall, followed by Allison pushing a pipe through her chest. As Allison tries to convince him to leave, he tells her he has something he has to do first. He then uses his bow to open hatches above, trapping Katrina in sunlight, resulting in her basically being vaporized, with her last act being her skeleton flipping them off. As they leave, a still paranoid Keith has Allison come up first just to make sure she's not a vampire, which she isn't. As he gets out, she gets pulled back down. The bouncer vows revenge on them for killing Katrina, but they are saved by AJ, who tries to make buddy-buddy with them, but they leave him behind. The film ends with Keith and Allison kissing, while AJ follows them from underground, with Keith telling him he'll take care of everything. Thanks for watching. If you like this content, please leave a like and subscribe, and hit the bell icon to know every time I update. If you want to help my channel grow, please check out my Patreon, where you can get access to content early, as well as see the content that can't be uploaded here on YouTube. Link will be in the description. Until next time.